Impressed.
Well, then you're easily impressed. Art, say something, boys. Is your microphone even on?
Yeah, I just don't want to interrupt Caesar. He's so good at what he's doing.
He is a natural, isn't he?
It's called getting comfortable right now before it actually starts.
Yeah, getting
used to talking, hearing your voice on the headphones.
Oh,
He's knocking the cobwebs off, baby. That's all that is. All right, that wasn't. Don't worry, Jimmy Walker. That didn't go over the air. Are you related to Johnny Walker?
No, I'm not.
Because I made that man rich. All right, what do we got? I guess we should press the live button, right? I should probably also put me on the camera. See?
Good plan.
Hello, welcome to the Godlogic Project. We have today a big recovery episode, local recovery here in the Pasco County and West Pasco County and Pasco County in general. We are going to honor first responders today. So there are services available through groups like Recovery Epicenter and ASAP and groups like that. But there are also county services available. And these folks in nurses and first responders and cops and EMTs and make a big difference. They save lives every day, and they don't get a lot of credit for that. So we're gonna spend an hour here kind of talking about how they contribute to the recovery community and how important it is that the recovery community that we work in be connected to the recovery community that the government provides. So the services that the government provides for us here in Pasco County plays a big role in the recovery process. But first, our intro music. Hello, God bless, and welcome. I'm Kevin Haggerty, and this is the Godlogic Project.
Shut up, Kevin.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. I'm Kevin Haggerty. That was Mike Houston telling me to shut up like he does on every episode. You can't hear it in the studio, ladies, but you can hear it over the air, and it's really, really funny, isn't it?
It's hilarious.
It's not funny at all. Stop. All right. In the studio, we have today, introduce yourself, Caesar. What's your name?
My name is Cesar Rodriguez, and I am co-chair of the Recovery Committee under ASAP.
Co-chair, Recovery Committee, ASAP. And Missy, what's your name?
So I'm Missy Coyle, and I am the co-chair also for the Substance Exposed Newborn Committee under ASAP.
Under ASAP. So you're also with ASAP as well?
I am.
And then we have, at the end of the table, who's that handsome devil we got down there?
my name is Art Rowan. I'm retired law enforcement. I'm also a board member of ASAP and on the steering committee for Recovery Epicenter.
Wow. So ASAP is represented today. So ASAP is in the house, right?
Absolutely.
Safe to say ASAP is in the house. Then we've got on the phone, we have a guy named, if I'm not mistaken, Johnny Walker. Is that your name, sir?
Jimmy Walker, and I'm a paramedic.
Jimmy Walker. Let me just say, bro, first of all, you're dynamite.
Thank you.
So any old people would get that joke? Anybody? Dynamite! Anybody? Nothing? So there's only me and Art are old enough to remember that. So they don't know. They really don't know. Jimmy, thank you for being on the Godlogic Project, buddy. And more importantly, thank you for the things that you do for the community. We've been around this. Sometimes on this end of the recovery process, we feel kind of like we're on an island, like there's no help or coordination at all. So to know that groups like ASAP are out there, groups like Recovery Epicenter are out there, and then especially first responders that are then trained in saving lives, really, in the recovery process. Tell us a little bit about, Jimmy, a little bit about what you do.
Well, so I'm a paramedic in a very busy 911 emergency system. So, my primary role is just, to be on the ambulance and respond to calls and help people in, whatever way I can. I guess is probably the simplest way to put that.
So do you guys have then special training? Is there special training for Pasco County EMTs when it comes to addiction, which is obviously the opioid addiction here in Pasco County is brutal. So it's got to be a good percentage of your calls. Is that fair to say?
Well, in the 911 system, we go to a pretty big variety of calls, but everything from maybe somebody that's just an alcoholic, wanting to go to the hospital to start their recovery process, all the way up to cardiac arrest due to overdoses, and everything in between. All that stuff is pretty common.
Okay. So, and that's kind of what we deal with here on the ground level. We have also, I'd like to plug in Missy because she is. Tell us what you do, Miss.
So my primary job that I really work towards is like navigating people in the community to start the recovery process or to re-enter it. And at that point, I can also like start looking for resources for them for more of a long-term recovery place after the initial detox.
Okay, so where Jimmy may take them literally off the streets or out of their home, or
I currently don't work in any ER at this time.
right. But then we can get them the medical attention they need, and then they can continue into programs like ASAP. Is that how this whole thing works?
Not exactly ASAP, but there are detox centers within Pasco County that we can navigate them to and get them in, find funding for, and then to more of a long-term residential program.
Okay, so ASAP kind of is like a clearinghouse for services. They try to send people, coordinate the services that are available with the need in the community. Is that fair enough?
No, not exactly. So ASAP is a very broad committee that brings all partners together so we can work towards the same goal, and which is reducing the stigma for opioid use in our community. And then we have other, projects. We have subcommittees under, like we have the recovery committee underneath ASAP. We have the substance exposed committee. We also have the RX committee, which works strictly a lot towards prescription misuse. And then we also have what is called the alcohol recovery committee.
Right. So then Art, then you would be more involved in, or you have been probably more involved in the legal end of it, where these we see more and more on the news where these pill peddlers or these pill houses are beginning to be shut down, slowed down. There's more regulation on opioids than there were. Do you see that making a difference, Art?
Yes, well, and it also helps that you can't arrest your way out of the problem. A lot of times law enforcement will arrive before EMS, or after EMS gets there, the person is refusing treatment or whatever. There's some legal things that law enforcement can do to basically force the person to go to the hospital or to go into a treatment center to start their recovery process, or at least let them know that recovery processes are available.
Okay, so we'll go back then to Caesar. Caesar, you have a story that is from this community, right? That ties into kind of every aspect of what we've begun to talk about here today. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, first I want to thank all three of our guests, Jimmy, Missy, and Art. They've all been on the front lines at one time or another, and people like them being in the community who suffer from compassion fatigue at times and see, overdose after overdose, they're dealing with it on the front lines. And those are the people who basically saved my life. When I was out there, I was a heroin addict for 17 years. And during that time, I was brought back with Narcan 5 separate times. And that's 5 times that somebody cared enough to administer this, even though they'd seen me over and over again. And there was no glimpse that they could see that I was going to get it right this time. So they never gave up on me, and I really appreciate people like that. And that's a good segue into the fact that being on the recovery committee, one of the projects that we're working on right now is, if you can see the banner behind me,
yep,
that is for First Responders Week. And we brought banners around to all the 12-step clubhouses, anybody in recovery meetings, and asked if they would like to sign to thank people for saving our lives. So these go into the hospitals, and we present them. We let somebody tell a little story so we can personalize it, and they get to see the recovery side of things. All they see is the trauma, somebody coming in, overdosing again and again, and we want them to be able to see what recovery looks like, that their hard work pays off, and the result is somebody's got a life, and they get to be a father, a friend, a brother. And right now we're in the middle of Nurses Week, and one of the other things we did was we passed out all these cards to the recovery community, and they get to write personal notes on these thanking nurses for saving their lives, because again, they're on the front lines. They're the ones that have to deal with us over and over again with the relapses, the overdoses, and it can be a thankless job. So for them to be able to see the result of their work, handwritten notes, something nice saying thank you, I think it makes a big impact as far as reducing stigma about, does an addict actually recover? Well, yes, we do recover, and we can show you that.
Yeah. So what do you think, Jimmy, then? It's got to become frustrating, and compassion fatigue, by the way, is something that we deal with in ministry as well. So we're always conscious of the fact that we could be burning out from what we do day and night. But for you guys, is it nice to see some of the fruit of your efforts when they come back with a banner or the cards? And I'm sure Missy can speak into that too. Sometimes that can make it all seem worthwhile. So the stress of your job can sometimes be overwhelming, and you become kind of tired of trying because you feel like you're not making a difference. So when you see something like this or get those cards, Missy, Jimmy, you can speak into this. Do you begin to feel then that you're getting some traction, that you're beginning to make a difference?
Yeah, stuff like that definitely helps. The compassion fatigue thing is definitely real. And, and it can get frustrating when you run on the same person over and over, so much to the point to where you don't have to ask them their personal questions anymore. What's your birthday? What's your medical history? Are you allergic to anything? You don't even have to ask these things anymore because you just have it memorized. There are certain people we take to the hospital almost daily. So to see the other side of it, that these people can go into recovery, can get better, and do all the things that Caesar mentioned, it does give you hope for these people, that maybe one day all of a sudden you'll stop running on them, and it'll be because they got better, not because they got worse.
Yeah, or that they didn't pass away or get permanently locked up. Missy, can you speak into that?
So basically what I see is the same people calling over and over, kind of like Jimmy's picking up the same people. So I get the same phone calls. I might send someone to detox 6-7 times before it really clicks. And once it actually clicks with them, to see them actually like make it through a program, complete the program, go out and actually become like successful at whatever they're doing in life and be able to be just, at their normal, without having to worry about, what's going to happen to me today, and they do so much better. So it's really nice to like see people actually, they do recover and can be like, successful in their life.
When there were times where I preached down at 49th Street and those folks were there kind of long term, and so I got to see them over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. But when I preach in Land O'Lakes now, they're next week I'm going to have a different 15 guys. Unfortunately, I'm getting to recognize some of them on the street. I'm getting to recognize some of them because they're back in jail 3 or 4 times in the course of the 3 years that I've been doing it. That I kind of know their story. I know their backstory. I know them. I know, they're hard in front of the guys, but when I'm talking to them one-on-one, they break down. They can't believe it happened again. Mm-hmm. And I can I'm giving myself goosebumps talking about it, but I can relate to that because I went through that I couldn't believe I had to do this one more day. I wanted to die back in the day. I just couldn't do this anymore. It's horribly tragic, and it's got a weigh on you when you see it day in and day out professionally.
Like I've seen it from the jail standpoint, going into the jails where I've met someone in jail, and then I see them out at a homeless camp, and from there, I may see them at the detox center, and then, we get them to a residential program, and the following week, I could see that same person back in jail. And so it just becomes like a cycle. And, sometimes it takes that for people. I mean, it took Caesar several times. So, it's like, it can happen. It does happen. People can be successful, but you have to be like willing to be that person that's going to continue to help and continue to give them the opportunity to make the change.
Yeah. And so for me, scripturally, I turn to John 15, which tells me to abide in the vine or stay focused on the vine and not the fruit. But if you're not a pastor or not a Christian, there's got to be something else, right? So if we in the recovery community focused on the fruit, we'd have given up a long time ago. I'm 30 years at this, but I would have, the percentages are not great. The success rate is not what you see on, what you might see in a movie, right? So we have a lot more losses, I think, than we have wins. And so when we see a win like Caesar, or some of the guys we've seen come through TN24 and be vital parts of this church now, it makes a big difference. To us, it does. I like to talk about and I like to celebrate the victories because the losses are just tragic. I think we buried 10 people last year that just didn't make it.
I think that's why this is so important as a community, to show our gratitude for these people that are first responders, to these nurses that are on the front lines. Because if we don't take the action to show them that recovery is possible and we do recover and we appreciate everything they do, they're not going to know. I Facebook messaged some of the pictures of the cards to a nurse that I know, and she works up in Spring Hill, and she was so excited. She said, that is going to make such a huge impact. A personal written note from somebody that was saved by a nurse and found recovery it's a huge impact. And especially with the compassion fatigue, day in, day out, being able to show them that we do recover and their efforts are not for nothing, that can reinvigorate people. And plus, it gives a good light on the recovery community.
Well, do you find, maybe Jimmy could speak into this, but do you find the availability of Narcan out in the field, is that making a big difference, Jimmy?
Oh, for us, absolutely. It's we definitely don't have any shortages of that on our truck. It gets used pretty regularly, and it definitely saves lives. I don't know what we would do without it, honestly. You can literally bring people back from the dead with that stuff.
Yeah, that is. Let's turn to Art because he has a little bit of experience of that as a sheriff's deputy, buddy. What's your thoughts on that? How important has that been to saving lives out there?
It's very important. In the past, before Narcan became readily available, we would have to wait for EMS to get there to start any kind of treatments. We would do the best we could. They were in cardiac arrest or something like that. We would start the CPR. But now, if we get there and we find that they've overdosed, we can administer the Narcan. All the deputies in Pasco, and I believe most of the city departments, have all received training and carry Narcan as part of their standard equipment.
So you don't always, generally, you wouldn't have the time to wait in a busy county like Pasco County for fire rescue or an EMT to get there. Now you have the opportunity to sustain life until they do get there. Is that kind of the...
Yeah, usually in a case like that, seconds count, so you can deliver as soon as you get there. Like in the case where I did it, the guy was already regained consciousness by the time fire rescue got there. So, and then they transported him to the hospital for further treatment. But it allowed at least them to be able to get into the medical system and the doctors to get a hold of them and further their treatment.
Is there special training, Jimmy, that goes along with being a first responder in this day and age with the opioid epidemic?
Yeah, with Narcan specifically, they train us different ways to administer Narcan. So for any average person can do this. If they have the medication and the little device you go to, we give it nasally. So if somebody's overdosing, all you have to do is spray it up their nose. And if they're still breathing, then most of the time that works. And like he said, it can work incredibly fast. It'll take somebody that's close to not breathing, close to dead, and in like a minute, 2 minutes, they're awake and talking, what happened, that kind of thing. Now, with us, we have further methods to administer medication as well, like IVs, for instance. That's my preferred method. Now, if somebody's already in cardiac arrest, what we do is we drill a little thing into your leg, and we inject the medications directly into your bone, and that's one of the fastest, better ways to administer it. But like I said, that's only if somebody is already in cardiac arrest. So we're working them as a cardiac arrest patient, but also looking for the cause. What caused this person to go into cardiac arrest? And if it's an overdose situation, that's when we give Narcan, and hopefully reverse that whole process.
Yeah, and the real shame of it is that it's so necessary right now. I mean, I've been around long enough to have seen the crack epidemic, right? The background of drugs and cocaine in my life, and then crack came along, and of course heroin preceded me. But none of it seems, and has made a resurgence, by the way. But nothing seems to compare to, unless I'm just getting old and tired, nothing seems to compare to the effects of opioids on these kids. I mean, if I'm honest, I'm not bursting with enthusiasm when I sit down and have a cup of coffee with them, and I don't expect to see them again. And that speaks to how deeply ingrained in our society I think that this opioid epidemic is right now. Caesar, are you familiar with the opioid epidemic, son?
I'm very familiar with the opioid epidemic. like I stated before, 17 years as an IV heroin user, pills, anything I could get my hands on. And I started early enough before the pill mill epidemic started. So when I was landing in rehabs and detoxes, they hadn't seen the level of opiate addiction that I had.
Right.
And, I was part of an early study that USF did with buprenorphine before Suboxone was on the market or in any of these things. So I had tried everything that I could find to quit. And I was unsuccessful. I'd get out of a rehab. My tolerance would be low. I'd pick up again. I'd overdose. And thank God somebody would come and administer Narcan, whether it was at one time at a Circle K bathroom where I landed in front of the door and they had to kick the door in to move my body to get into there and administer it to save my life. So on the other end of that now, I work with guys all the time that are still in the middle of this. And, I have a lot of hope and I try to give hope, but it's dark. I know how hard it was for me to get out of it. And, it's not lost on me that this is not going to be an easy road for anybody that's caught up in the middle of it.
Well, it's encouraging, I think, that there is, the more I get, since I started the podcast, really, but the more I get plugged into or replugged into the recovery community and the resources that are available and the coordination that goes on in the community to get those resources out to people. So sometimes people, come to me for help, and I make phone calls, I call people and try to figure out what's available right now. So to know that that there's training in the first responders, to know that the police are now beginning to understand certainly what they're going to be up against when they go on a lot of these calls, and then the opportunities once this life is saved to then be rebuilt and to have the tools to rebuild that life through ASAP or Recovery Epicenter and organizations like that.
You brought up Recovery Epicenter, and that's what this RCO is going to be one of our biggest assets that we're going to have in the community once it's together. It's going to be a one-stop shop for resources. If you need to find detox, treatment, if you need help for job placement, anything that'll put you in a better situation to maintain your recovery, you'll be able to find all in one spot.
Yeah.
And we haven't had that before. And as people in recovery, we've been the resource brokers ourselves. We do the best we can to get somebody in. Missy can attest. We call her in the middle of the night. Hey, we've got somebody that needs detox. Help, please, now. And she never says no, and she always does it. And she will navigate anybody. Her heart is huge, and she's a huge asset to all of us.
Well, you're going to be sorry you told me that, because I'm going to have your number before this is over, because I am at a loss generally. I call Rachel. That's what I do.
And then Rachel calls me.
I usually find out about it one way or the other. I did want to mention something, though. I know we're talking a lot about like the opioid epidemic. It's not just the prescription medications, though, that we need to look at, or just the heroin. So back when, if you guys remember, it was more so like the pill mills and stuff like that, as you had mentioned earlier. So along came the PDMP, and once we had that in place and our medical providers and pharmacists and everyone started using the PDMP, we kind of
tell us what the PDMP is.
That's a good idea.
So eForce is a prescribing system that's used, throughout the medical community, that the pharmacists and the doctors, they can go in and check basically to kind of see if people were like doctor shopping, or, and a lot of times it can just be used to make sure, one medication's not going, that they're getting from, I don't know, a foot doctor is going to, go badly with something they're getting from their primary care. But eForce is like the system used, and the PDMP is the system that the state and the Department of Health have in place to, coordinate and make sure that all prescribers can, unify in that manner and be checking that.
Okay, so
since that came along, like one of the things was, it's not just the RXs, it's not just the heroin. We have to look at what the heroin's being cut with and the fentanyl. And that becomes really important, to first responders or to law enforcement when they come up on scene. And, maybe they're going to be actually like introduced to that, not knowingly. So everyone has to kind of be prepared that and checking those surroundings and be smart about that. I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
Well, I do. I appreciate you putting that in there, Jimmy. I don't want to keep you longer than you can stay, so you can speak up and sign out anytime you like, or you're welcome to continue to be part of the conversation. That's totally up to you, buddy.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm good for another few minutes.
Okay, so the boss isn't in the room.
No, not yet anyway.
So that's a plus.
Yeah.
And, you know, what Missy brings up is the fentanyl, but specifically the carfentanil that was going around. First responders, sheriff's deputies, people that came into contact with this that touched it were overdosing just from skin contact. This stuff is so strong.
Right.
So the Narcan wasn't only saving the lives of the people that overdosed, but of the first responders that had contact with this. So the epidemic goes so much deeper than just the person suffering from the addiction.
Well, that's a serious, it's strange to say, a benefit of having the Narcan available. But that again, the tragedy is that there's a need for that, right? That they can, while trying to save a life, be exposed to something that may take their life without that Narcan.
Yeah,
there.
there's been cases where the law enforcement had to use the Narcan on their partner because they would get there, or even the police canines, as they were doing the search, would come in contact with just the exposure in the air of the fentanyl or cofentanyl, and a few minutes later they would be getting the effects of it and not even realize it.
Yeah. So then, and then how, you would think it was anything but that. When you first started getting symptoms, you would think it would be anything but that. Who would think that it would be that anyway? So, what else, Jimmy? Do you have anything to add, buddy?
Well, I was going to say with that, we did do some trainings on that and, that type of thing on how to be safer with that so we don't end up getting an exposure ourselves. But, it can be real hard when someone overdoses. They're actually almost never, in a complete wide open room where it's safe and you can see everything. They're in that cramped hallway in between the bathroom and the bedroom. I had a few weeks ago a guy overdose in his car at a red light with his foot on the brake with a needle still in the arm, and it's just all kinds of stuff all in the car. We had to jump in there right away and start administering aid. This guy was, close to not breathing anymore. And then it's like, what happens when we give them the Narcan? Like I said earlier, they wake up right away. So this guy was huge, and I'm not small, but this guy was really big. And like, all right, so here we go, and we give the Narcan, kind of wondering what's going to happen when he wakes up. And this poor guy woke up, looked around, startled at first, and then he was like, did I overdose again? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I'm sorry, guys. But, so that was good. But, that could have really gone the other way, with the exposures or potentially a violent patient. That's something, that we always have to watch out for as well.
Yeah, well, that would be then, they come up against that fight and flight instinct, and you don't know which one they're going to choose, having just woken up from God knows what, right?
Can I ask Jimmy a question?
Yep.
Yeah, Jimmy, so have you ever experienced, because I know in my experience, when the Narcan is administered, you almost immediately go into detox. So you go into withdrawal symptoms. Have you seen people actually angry and violent with you because of the Narcan being administered?
I've been real lucky with that. I haven't seen a whole lot of angry people. What you do see is people wake up and they say, oh, what happened? And we're like, well, you overdosed. And they'll say, I didn't overdose. I don't do drugs. And it's like the needle's in your arm, like right now. And they're like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't, and there's straight denial.
Wouldn't me.
Yeah, exactly. And, or, we had a guy in the bathroom, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, had that maybe 2 weeks ago. And, his syringe and his spoon were sitting there on the counter and, he's on the ground and, you push Narcan, they come back and, like I said, he wasn't angry or combative like what you mentioned, but denial, definitely. So that's what we see most of the time.
Yeah, that would be my first response back in the day was the deny everything, no matter how much evidence was there, because your first initial fear once you wake up is, am I going to jail right now?
Yeah, and are they going to separate me from my supply?
It's, we're not police officers, you're not arrested, you're not in trouble. I just want to make sure you're not going to die again, on me, in the next few minutes.
And I think I think that's part of the stigma that people face, or, with the community is like they're afraid. So Jimmy, as a paramedic, showing up on the scene and he's there to help. But these people in the community, they're scared. Like they don't want to go through like the detox that they're going to have to go through in jail. They don't want to be, locked up for, having a substance abuse misuse, issue. That's,
Well,
one of the things that they really fear.
I'll let you in on a little industry secret. We take them to the emergency room and try to get them to Baker Act themselves, so then they would be detoxed. And by the time we get to that point, more often than not, after 5 or 6 hours, they need to drink. They need to leave. They're not there to detox anymore. So they make a run for it. I mean, I've had, I can tell you, I won't tell you, but I can tell you crazy stories of being in the emergency room with dudes smoking crack in the bathroom while I'm waiting to get them detoxed, So it's, it is that you even have to go. That's the heartbreaker. You have to go. That we felt we had to go around the system. That the system wasn't, a system wasn't in place. And by this conversation, I'm beginning to think that systems will be in place, and people are in Tallahassee are beginning to recognize the need for what we in the community, we on the ground in the recovery community go through every day. Seems like just something you see on TV to folks that are not plugged into it, right?
Well, like we said, even if law enforcement is the one that delivers the Narcan, we're not going to arrest you for overdosing. We're going to make sure you get the medical treatment. There's the Good Samaritan Act that may or may not apply to the situation, but we're going to make sure you get into the EMS system, at least get into the recovery system. Then after that, to take the totality of the circumstances, but more than likely you're not going to get arrested for overdosing.
Well, what is the Good Samaritan Act, Art?
That's act where if you call EMS, you won't be arrested for calling EMS, even if you're the one or you're a friend. It works for drugs and or alcohol, where if you call somebody's on overdosing, you're not going to get arrested for calling.
Okay, and that goes obviously just for overdosing, right?
No, alcohol too. If alcohol overdose, drugs, alcohol, anything like that.
Yeah, I that's my background. So I had, we talk now a lot about opioids and addiction, but for me, I stopped breathing from alcohol. I mean, it was you can do it with stuff you can buy at Walgreens, right? You can get in this mess with stuff you buy at places like Winn-Dixie, right? So I tell the guys when I preach in Land O'Lakes, it's 45 minutes away. Tell them I'm 30 years from my last drink, I'm arm's length from my next one, because it's not hard. You don't have to have a hookup or connection. You can stop anywhere, any 7-Eleven, and start that cycle over again. So you're an arm's length away from your next drink the rest of your life. What role does alcohol play in some of these? Jimmy, maybe you speak into this. I know alcohol is still obviously a very big problem. What role does that play in your EMT work, in your first responder work? Do you see? I'm guessing you see a lot of alcohol-related health problems, right?
Yeah, we run an assortment of calls where alcohol is the main issue. That's something we do almost daily. Everything from the homeless person that's so intoxicated they can't walk anymore. We can't leave them on the street, so we take them to the emergency room. People at home that are just really sick from drinking too much. People that call just because like I said earlier, they want to start the recovery process. Car accidents for calls, from driving while intoxicated. I mean, alcohol is definitely a big problem. Anything you can think of, that's what we're going to.
Well, that is Art. How about how many police calls aren't alcohol related? It seems to me that every time I had to speak to the cops, I was drinking that day, and almost always I break out in handcuffs when I drink, bro. So how often does that play into a police call?
It plays a role. Like in my last few years with the sheriff's office, I was in charge of the DUI unit, so we were very involved in alcohol-related things. Like you mentioned, the person would pass out at the light, 2 or 3 cycles of the light going through, and their foot would be on the brake, and the car would still be in drive. Also, alcohol mixed with anything. Jake always said a beer and a Xanax, and the person was out. They would be on the nod. But it would be a very you wouldn't know how much drugs or alcohol they had taken because of that interaction between the two.
Yeah. Well, I had my worst night, one of my worst nights in my drinking career. I lost my wallet and didn't have money for the clubs, for the drinking in the city in New York. But I had Valium. I had a pocket full of Valium. So I only needed a few drinks with a handful of Valium to do some major damage that night. I mean, I wrecked a car, put my girlfriend through a windshield. It turned out horribly. So the effects of mixing the two is just exponential, the damage that does. And anybody in this room have any experience with anything like that? One at a time, please.
Yeah, I mean, on top of my 5 times being Narcan, I've also got 5 DUIs.
Congratulations.
That 5 is my lucky number, apparently. Yeah. But, yeah, there was always a benzo involved in my drinking, and there was always a blackout involved in that. And you never know what's going to happen because I'm not a pharmacist, and I don't know exactly how much to take of this to add to that. And I end up completely blacked out in places that I don't remember going to. So it's extremely dangerous. But I did want to add something to the conversation. I think that ASAP does such an amazing job. We're talking about the stigma of being afraid you're going to be arrested for things. ASAP does a great job of bringing in all these community partners and doing forums. We did a Narcan town hall, and law enforcement is represented, pharmacists are represented. You know, we've got first responders, we've got judges, and all these people interact with the recovery community, and it tears down those walls and it tears down the fears. And the more we could spread that these people are here to help, not to lock us up, the better we are.
Right. And so this brings home then the poster, right? This brings home your efforts to reach out to first responders and thank them for what they're doing. And thank you, Jimmy, for I would never give it another thought if you guys didn't bring it to my attention once in a while that this isn't just hard on the pastor at 11 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning. It's hard on everybody in that chain of providence, right? Everybody that provides some level of service to that person can feel overwhelmed, right? So I appreciate you, Jimmy, for being part of the conversation, buddy. And we do thank you guys because just the opportunity to make a difference. You guys provide us with that opportunity. If we can make that difference, that's amazing, you know.
I mean, I personally love helping people. That's why I'm in the field that I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to have a servant's heart to do this. Again, if you did it for notoriety or if you did it because the results were so strong, right? I'd have quit a long time ago if I went by how many people that I tried to help compared to how many people that really kind of got a couple of years under their belt. You know, the percentages are dismal in recovery, even from alcohol. So it is by the grace of God that that's not me we're talking about, right? Or that I have the opportunity. My bottom, by the way, for the record, was that I stopped breathing. So there was no other bottom. The next bottom was room temperature, right? And there was no Narcan, and there certainly were no cops in my neighborhood. Nobody was calling the cops, I can guarantee you that. So they leave you on a train station and just go on with their lives. So the opportunity to be here to have this conversation is an absolute blessing, you know.
I just wanted to add in, I know I keep interrupting, but...
No, you're a guest on the show, actually, so you're supposed to speak.
I just wanted to add in, though, you know, Art being retired from Pasco Sheriff's Office and stuff, I think we need to make sure we are recognizing them also, because I get weekly emails and, you know, calls, you know, from our Sheriff's Department, either detectives or deputies and stuff, where they're reaching out. They're that, like we were saying, the fear is there that they'll be arrested for people in the community who need help or services, but we actually have people with our Sheriff's Department who are out, you know, actually trying to find the resources and connect them. So it's not all bad. They're out there doing the hard work too.
Well, let's not get out of line here. I'm not thanking any cops. I'll tell you right now. Sorry, Art, but
oh well.
I still have warrants, bro. I ain't going to go around thanking cops.
You're terrible.
Thank you, Art, for everything, and you, you know, being in playing an administrative role in the sheriff's office, and truth is, being our outreach now here at Next Level Church, because we, you know, we want to stay plugged in, we want to continue to make a difference. But you made a difference in your career, in your long career for sure. I know by the response when we're together out in public, the response how people respond to you, and you're making that impact here at the church. So most people don't want to even speak to Pastor Kevin anymore. They just want to speak to Art.
Because Art's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, and this is one of the things we still do need to work on, if I'd have known some of the things that I've learned now being involved with the people in recovery, if I'd have known some of that stuff when I was active in law enforcement, it would have helped a lot. So that's one of the areas we still need to work on, is letting the people currently in law enforcement know what is out there. It's just also the stigma involved.
Yeah.
We only saw, we either Baker acted them, Myers acted them, arrested them, turned them over to EMS and left them at the emergency room or left them at the jail, and we never knew what happened. I've been involved in basically the other half now, where you do see the wonderful things that these people are doing or working towards, even in the short time I've been doing, only a couple of years. But that's some of the training and some of the outreach we still need to do with law enforcement to let them know what the other half and what happens after they leave them there.
Well, that brings up a good point. Then maybe we should have a Godlogic Project episode with law enforcement in here and talk about law enforcement relative to recovery. Right? That might not be a terrible idea. I won't be here. We'll have to have a guest host, but
Yeah,
it may not be a terrible idea.
But I'll find out about your warrants as soon as this is over. I still have contact.
I already sent a message to check you out.
Yeah, they'll be waiting for me when we walk out. Thank God the love bugs will get them, and I'll make a run for it into the woods. While they're swiping at love bugs out in the parking lot. It's terrible out there. All right, Jimmy, well, I'm going to let you go, buddy. I appreciate you being part of the conversation, supporting us here at the Godlogic Project and supporting the recovery community. We joke around, but what you do is really appreciated. And believe me, it sometimes you don't know, but it really makes a difference. So it's not just a poster. It's our opportunity to continue the work that you started out there, at the Circle K bathroom. And hopefully we could have that story end well, and end kind of like a Caesar.
That's
Caesar's
what I always
story.
hope for, And I think it's important to get out there with the stigma thing that, addiction doesn't, it doesn't affect any specific race, gender, or somebody in a socioeconomic class. It can be anybody. And so anybody out there that has friends, family, loved ones, that do suffer from addiction in one way or the other, I would urge everybody to learn, CPR and, have 911 on speed dial just in case.
Yeah. It is. It is. I'm going to 49th Street to visit a family member tonight. That tells you anything. So even in a pastor's family, this stuff goes on. So it is. It is not a respecter of persons, addiction, right? It doesn't care who you are or what you have. It will crush everything in its path, and it doesn't matter. I've been at meetings with doctors and lawyers and even cops, and me, a homeless dude and a lawyer sitting at a table, right? So it really doesn't matter.
No.
Addiction doesn't care who you are or who you think you are. It'll eat you alive. That's the enemy working, through that addiction.
So with that, thanks everybody for having me on.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm going to go hop on the truck now and finish my shift.
All right, we appreciate everything you do. Thank you, buddy.
I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you.
All right, man. God bless.
Bye.
So, everybody, what else you want to talk about? Did we wait a second? First of all, did we hit every point that Rachel wanted to bring up?
Let's make sure. Let's look out into
Not
the
all.
audience.
Let's pretend we have a big studio audience first of all. Oh, sit down, guys. You're crazy. Sit down. Settle down. All right, that was electronic. There's nobody in the studio but us. The studio's like 14 by 12. So. Art would like to give us a demonstration on the application of Narcan. How would that be, Art?
Yeah, we'll go over a little bit of it. What it is, if you get a box like this, there's 2 doses in a box. They're packaged like this. Once you find somebody that appears to be overdosed, like CPR, you shake, shout, make sure that you don't get a response. They may just be asleep, but shake, shout, open the package. The nasal application, like Jimmy mentioned, is what law enforcement has. Basically, you put it up, you lay them on their back, put this in either nostril, push the plunger, and it squirts the Narcan up into the nasal cavity and goes into their bloodstream.
So it just has to get to the mucous membrane, and they don't have to somehow breathe it in?
No,
it'll go through the, all right.
And then wait. If you don't get a response within a minute or so, if you have another dose, give them another dose. In the incident where I was involved with was a motel up in the 52 and 19 area up in Hudson. The guy was out. Walked in the room, they mentioned the same thing. There was the syringe was there, the spoons were there, the tourniquet was there. He was laying on his back next to the bed. His girlfriend was the one that called. I administered the Narcan. No response. I gave him a sternum rub. That woke him up. And then, like Jimmy mentioned, the paramedics being over him, it was more of a surprise to see a badge. The first thing he saw was a deputy staring him in the face, which some cases people want to fight when they see that or whatever when we wake them up. But, basically we, tell them the sheriff's office, just, relax, you're okay. And then by the time fire rescue got there, he was sitting up talking, and then they transported him to Bayonet Point.
So that is one dose. You wait 60 seconds or whatever. If you don't get a response, you can do it again. How many are there different size doses for different size individuals? And also, how many times can you do it before you're doing damage or you just give up?
Well, the good thing about Narcan,
it takes, right?
Yeah, and the good thing about Narcan, if they don't need it, it's not going to hurt them.
Okay.
This maybe can go more into the medical aspect of it, but if you do, and the training we had, if it may take 2 or 3, once EMS gets there, they can administer it in a more direct way or different amounts. These are, a dosed amount, so we don't have any control over that. But if they give it to them and they didn't need it, so the alternative is worse.
So it wouldn't do any damage, any real damage. I'm somebody that, I write down when I take Tylenol, so I don't take it in 3 hours. Make sure I wait 4 hours. I'm very sensitive about what I would take now. But it doesn't do, Missy, any kind of real damage like that where you could you can hurt somebody with that application?
Not that I'm aware of. Usually, whenever I'm talking to someone who's giving Narcan or that's at the point, in their life where they think they may have to give it to someone, so they've acquired it, I always tell them, give the Narcan, regardless, just because of the fact that it would be definitely better to be safe than sorry. And I've never heard, anything of it causing any kind of other issues if they didn't need the Narcan.
Okay, so we then have the even under that kind of pressure in an emergency situation, it's worth doing, right? So there's no tertiary things to worry about that might be counterindicative to
Not that I'm aware of. And I would always advise also that, to have EMS en route, because you never know what the situation's going to be whenever they do regain conscious, or what if that dose doesn't work and you need a second dose and you don't have it.
And Narcan's only a temporary thing to be able to get them into that. Eventually the Narcan's going to wear off and they're going to go right back into being out again. So you do need to get EMS involved. You need to get them to the hospital. Just because they're feeling good for 5 minutes doesn't mean that you didn't cure them. You just bought them some time to then apply real what maybe a poor term, but real medical attention to whatever they might need. So you saved a life basically, but now you've got to sustain that life through the. It's
definitely an emergency medication. So whenever you think about Narcan, it's more so it's a life-saving medication, kind of like I relate it somewhat to like insulin. If someone's going into a diabetic coma, they may need that insulin. And if you give them if they got the medical attention and got what they needed, then that would save them. It doesn't mean it's going to completely fix the problem. So they still need that medical attention.
Yeah. And with my church security background, we always go first to calling 911, then deal with the things we have to deal with. So.
Well, that's a good point. That the Good Samaritan Act is a lot of questions we've gotten is who should carry Narcan? And there was some stigma attached to it. Some parents said that they didn't want to carry Narcan, even though their kid they knew was using, because they didn't want to, co-sign the behavior and say, I'm going to carry Narcan because I know you're using. Anybody that knows somebody that has a substance abuse problem should be carrying Narcan. It's going to save a life. And like Art said, it gives you a window. So 911 has to be part of the administering of Narcan, because just because they sit back up does not mean in 15 minutes that they will not be flat on their back again. It gives you a window where EMTs can come in and administer what needs to be done, and they can be brought to the hospital. But anybody that knows somebody that's using opiates needs to be carrying this.
Have access to Narcan. Is this something you can just buy at Walgreens?
No, it is not. But I know that Recovery Epicenter Foundation, if you go to them, they will get it into your hands for free, no cost, and that is the easiest, quickest access that I know about.
So so it's available. Anybody can apply it, and everybody should be prepared. So Art's demonstration, critically important that people watch this and see that it's, especially this segment of this. I may make a smaller video of this when in post-processing, that people understand that this stuff is available, where it's available, how easy and how safe it is to apply, and that it might save a life. That's kind of Narcan in a nutshell. Narcan in a nutshell. Isn't that a song from the 70s? Remember that song, Narcan in a
I
Nutshell?
think the Doobie Brothers did it.
Yeah, that was the Doobie Brothers. You're right. So we've discussed First Responder Appreciation Week, month, or in general.
So we do have one more thing we need to talk about that I believe Missy would love to talk about. The conference.
Yeah.
Oh, the
So,
conference.
The conference is coming up, yes. So on May 14th at Saddlebrook Resort in Wesley Chapel, ASAP is partnership with Baycare also, and they are doing a annual conference. Our guest speaker for the morning is going to be Austin Eubanks. He's actually a Columbine survivor from the Columbine shooter. You know what I'm trying to say
Yeah, the
here.
shooting at Columbine.
The shooting at Columbine.
That's the thing.
So actually, I've actually got to see him talk before, and he's a really good presenter. His story started, with everything that happened with the school shooting, and then he actually, instead of dealing with the real pain and the real trauma and stuff, he just went on that path, and actually, with the RX and the opioids started, just using and misusing, and he's there and he tells his story, and it's so like it just takes you back, that people can recover, and it kind of goes to the same thing. And now he's out helping other people and telling his story, and he's just a great presenter. And you guys can go on to ASAP, Pasco ASAP, and register online. You do need to register for the conference. There is some scholarships available for people that are unable to pay, but I believe the fee is $30. And if you fill out a scholarship, that can be reviewed. We contact you, and it's going to be a great day, May 14th.
All right, that's May 14th. What day of the week is that?
That's on a Tuesday.
That's on a Tuesday, May 14th at Saddlebrook Resort. I think I'll go on record as saying maybe the Godlogic Project will sponsor a couple people to that. So if you can't get to that, we would, if you want to go but you don't have the $30, maybe I can scrape together some $60 to get a couple people there, because that's how important this whole thing is.
We really
trying
want to
to
see
make
a lot of
difference.
recovery people there, so they can take the information back and go out and help, educate and spread the word and stuff.
So,
the information.
What's going on? Is it May 28th? We have something else going on? Isn't there a big
As we all look at each other confused.
July what? July 23rd is what? A Narcan giveaway, July 23rd. So that would be important to the conversation. It's a good thing we brought Rachel. Have we gone all the way down your checklist, Rachel? Would you say we've touched on everything you wanted to talk about?
You gave us a thumbs up earlier, and then, are we sure? Are we good? Oh, here comes the camera.
You thought you were going to not be on TV today? But look, the whole world is watching you right now. What would you like to say about
Tell us everything you need to know.
Yeah. Start from the beginning. What did we talk about? I don't remember what we talked about. The phone has a mic. I even switched the mic. So I think it does.
May 22nd at Trinity Church of Christ, we have RCO Symposium Planning. We'd love to see everyone there at 11 a.m. You can go on the Recovery Epicenter page for any information. July 23rd, we're going to be hosting a Narcan giveaway community forum at Calvary Chapel Worship Center at 6 p.m.
There are 47,000 people watching this right now, looking at the screen.
Yeah.
So there are more people watching this now than, I don't know. So really nobody's watching. It's cool. So we've got, but this will be on Facebook and YouTube channel for posterity. So it's important that we get this. This is our chance to get this out to as many people as we possibly can. Anything you would like to add?
Subscribe to Godlogic Project.
Oh, nice.
Sweet
available
plug.
on Facebook and on YouTube.
Yes, absolutely.
I understand the host is strikingly handsome. Would you say that's
Absolutely.
accurate? And then you thought you weren't going to be on TV today, but Kelly, who
Go to the conference, PascoASAP.com.
PascoASAP.com.
Yes.
And then anything else you'd like to say to the recovery community?
I would just like to say the conference is a great place to be able to see people in recovery that are mingling with decision makers, law enforcement, doctors, you name it, across the board. Everybody comes together for a common cause, and that is prevention and recovery. So it's a great place to be able to see this coalition in action.
I appreciate your filling in that time there, buddy. And is there, as we sign off, would you like to say hello or goodbye to anybody?
No, I think we're
No?
good.
Kelly?
Bye. Subscribe to Godlogic. Go to
Subscribe.
PascoASAP.com and register for that conference.
She's sitting using up all our air conditioning.
Oh, it's so nice. It's so hot
Somebody
here.
forgot to turn the fan on. Arkin, anything you'd like to say, buddy?
Just subscribe to Godlogic Project.
Get the hell away from you? Is that really what you're thinking? And then Missy, I know you've got something to say. You're a nurse. Would you like to say something?
Just thank you for having us, and we appreciate all our first responders. And go register for the conference.
Register for the conference. Hold on. Is this my camera? Oh, this is Art's camera. So Art's not going to be on TV anymore because.
That's a shame.
Hold on.
No, it's not.
Well, you know what happens when I take Art off the air? Hold
all
on.
all the subscribers go away.
My female viewership goes through the floor. So when Art first comes on the air, this is what we get. And then when I come out, it's. I get that a lot. And one thing you'll almost never hear on the Godlogic Project is. Ain't nobody laughing on this show. All right. So we're going to sign off here. Appreciate you guys. Why don't I put myself on the camera? Probably a good idea since I'm actually the host. Appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you subscribing. Get to the conference, by the way, May 14th. The website for that again one more time.
PascoASAP.com.
PascoASAP.com. That's PascoASAP.com. It's what? It's what? It's PascoASAP.com. Pasco, like the county.
ASAP.
ASAP is like
ASAP. Substance Abuse Prevention.
Agency for Substance
Alliance
for Substance Abuse Prevention.
ASAP.
So we want to prevent substance abuse.
Correct.
So I've been on the wrong show this whole time. I was hoping to get my hands on some of that Narcan before it was over. You look me up, bro. Does it work? Does it work? Do anything?
It does nothing if you don't need it.
All right.
We'll leave the samples here for you.
I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you supporting the Godlogic Project. If you'd like to get to the ASAP conference on May 14th and you don't have the $30, email me at godlogicproject@gmail.com. I don't have an unlimited supply of money, but I will try to get a couple people over there. Nobody told you they love you today. God loves you. So do I. Receive that. Be blessed. We'll speak soon. Thank you for supporting the Godlogic Project. No one's told you they love you today. God loves you. God do I. Receive that. Be blessed. We'll speak soon. This has been a Rev Kev production. Your mileage may vary.
Shut up, Kevin.